8:02, so we will get started this morning. We were just having a conversation about Zoom meetings, but we really hope for the March meeting, a month from now, that we'll be able to be in person again, that things will be looking much better as far as the pandemic goes, and we can, once again, all be safely in one room. For the people who are on the call who aren't legislators this morning, it might be the easiest thing for you to do if you would put any questions that you have in the chat, and Darcy and I will try to keep track of that. We are going to start with our senators this morning as we normally do, and then we'll probably go in reverse alphabetical order, if that's okay. So that would, Representative Williams, that means we'd start with you. Does anyone need to go earlier? Do you have another obligation, or do you think that timing will work okay? Okay. All right, great. All right, so we've got plenty of time this morning because right now we only have 5 of our legislators. So Senator Kitchell, would you kick us off?
Certainly. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for tuning in, I guess we would say. The one thing that I would like to just bring to people's attention again, and that is the reapportionment process that is underway. It's something we have to do every 10 years based on census data. And in that process, I'm sure you have read, the Northeast Kingdom has lost population. Other areas of the state, including Franklin County and Chittenden County, have gained. So there are different proposals that would affect the Senate districts that are currently exist. I'm not sure whether maybe the House districts are going to remain more the same, but there are proposals to move to single seat districts or combination or expanding more towns. Now, 10 years ago, in order to keep the 2 seats in Essex Orleans, they added a couple of towns in Franklin County and a couple of towns in Lamoille County. But that was 10 years ago, and the population shift has still continued. So I bring that up because I think in November, there will be a different configuration, and depending on who's running again for office in the Senate, I guess Senator Benning has higher aspirations. So we're going to perhaps see a different district configuration and where you might be voting. The other area, I chair the Appropriations Committee, and I'm on transportation. So obviously, the federal money has been a very dominant theme. And one of the things that I think we can really be proud of, last year in the legislature, we gave funding to the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, as well as to our regional planning agencies, which in our case is NVDA. And 176 million, I believe, was available under ARPA to come to Vermont cities and towns, but you had to apply. And Vermont actually had almost universal participation in this program. Only one town opted not to apply. And we are hearing that giving the support to the towns really made the difference. And that allows funds to flow, and they're being used for capital improvements, wastewater, of different projects. And so it really has been, I think, a wonderful experience when we heard other areas of the country actually were turning this money down because they felt that the requirements to obtain it and to meet the reporting requirements was too burdensome. The Senate Appropriations had the Budget Adjustment Act that came over from the House, and we had a committee of conference. We voted that out last week on a unanimous vote in the Senate. Once again, I think 2 areas that are really important to anyone in this area and in the state, and that is the investment in housing, the shortage of housing, and the money that's going out. We put in another $55 million in the budget adjustment, and the House had switched and put in general fund, which we supported strongly because you cannot use federal funds to leverage tax credits. And those are really important in putting together the funding packages for a lot of our larger housing projects, whether we're talking about the one in West Burke or whether we're talking about the Depot New Avenue Hotel apartment project. So housing is very much up there. Broadband as well. We continue to make progress. We had appropriated $150 million, and then there's more money, and created a Vermont Community Broadband Board that's been headed up by Christine Hallquist, who was former CEO of Vermont Electric. So she's been in utilities, and we're working through our communications union districts that have been created and are really designed to serve last mile and areas of the state that are not attractive to the to the normal internet service providers for fiscal reasons. Workforce is very much on everyone's mind. It doesn't seem as though there's an area that's not experiencing a shortage, and everybody is, depending on their committee of jurisdiction, is saying they've got to address the workforce. So we've got workforce from weatherization, staff, workforce, to obviously nursing, mental health, you just name it, it's all across the board. So how we support our workforce and how we can meet the needs of Vermonters and our employers is an ongoing challenge, and how we invest in our workforce and train and upskill our workforce for today's needs. The other area briefly is I do serve on transportation. It's no secret that the revenues into the T fund are anemic, and we're going to be challenged to match all the federal infrastructure money that is coming our way. Been spending a lot of time. There has been no increase in the user fees for transportation, and by that I mean registration or licenses, et cetera, for 6 years, and that has had an obviously impact on the revenues flowing into the transportation fund from those user fees. I think that might be about $15 million a year. So the challenge is how we can find the match that's necessary to draw the federal funds. They are also available in other areas, including wastewater and broadband and other really important areas for the future of the state. So our challenge is to be sure that we can leverage all those federal dollars that are coming to the state, because the deferred maintenance, or even towns that don't have wastewater or public water systems, it's much more expensive and more difficult to deal with the housing if you don't have that basic infrastructure in place. So that's sort of it from transportation and the budget adjustment. We're starting to take up the FY 2023 budget, but I'll let Representative Feltes talk about that because they have the pleasure of going first. So that's sort of where we are in Senate Transportation and Senate Appropriations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. So Senator Benning, can we hear from you?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Joe Benning. I am the junior senator from Caledonia County. In a couple of more months, I won't longer be, and I'm hoping not to leave the Senate, but I will not be serving as a senator. I want to thank everybody for the honor and the privilege for having that opportunity the past 12 years. It's been a wonderful ride. And as things go forward, we should probably give you some heads up on where things are looking with the reapportionment lines. Jane talked briefly about it. I'm going to spend a little bit more time with it. There's good news and there's bad news on this front. First is the population in all of the Northeast Kingdom has gone down so much that the kingdom, which normally had 4 state senators, is only going to be allotted 3. At the latest, I've heard as of the 25th, which was Friday, the draft as it currently looks, redrawing the map, unfortunately has Caledonia County down to 1 seat. The county is being divided. Right now, the 2-seat district is all of Caledonia County and the 6 northeasternmost towns in Orange County. As a result of the latest map being drawn, and I will caution you that this is a moving target, so what I say to you today may very well change in a week, but the latest draft that I have seen would have the towns of Linden, St. Johnsbury, Danville, Peacham, Groton, Reigate, and Newbury as one seat, as a one-seat district. The towns of Walden, Stannard, Wheelock, Sheffield, Sutton, Burke, Newark, Kirby, and Waterford, which are currently in the Caledonia district, would be moved to the Essex Orleans district. Now, that's a lot to try to grasp in one sitting, but I'll say again that the map is being redrawn as a result of us losing quite a bit of population, and it is still a moving target, so I cannot predict that that will be the end result. That's the bad news. The good news is, as a result of a bill I brought 2 years ago with the President Pro Tem, the Chittenden County six-pack is being broken up. And on this latest map that I have seen, that is going to be now, instead of one district with 6 state senators, it would be 5 districts with 2 members each max, and 2 of those 5 would have 1 senator each. I say that's good news because it divides up the county in such a way that I think there will be more balance in the legislature should this come to fruition. And I suspect very strongly it will, because the bill that we passed a couple of years ago mandates that there should be no more than 3-member districts. And that broke up the Chittenden County six-pack altogether. I chair Senate institutions. Briefly on that score, we are still trying to replace the Woodside Juvenile Facility. For those of you on the southern end of our district, the town of Newbury is still facing a potential placement, but that place is in litigation at the moment. I have no idea where that will end up, but there has been considerable pushback from the town of Newbury. And in all honesty, the facility if placed there would be totally void of any kind of support services in that locality. So I'm very sympathetic to the argument that it should not be placed there. However, at the moment, unfortunately, we also have no plan B. So that's an ongoing conversation. I'm very happy to say that the Memorial Valley Rail Trail will be completed this coming fall. We managed to keep money in the capital bill to have that completed, and the pressure is still on to make sure that gets done, hopefully by October. Over in Judiciary, which is another committee that I serve on, we've had a lot of discussion about several different bills. I'm just going to bring up 2 of them at the moment. One is qualified immunity for police officers. That has received substantial pushback from 3 members of the 5-member committee. I'm one of those 3 members who pushed back on it. We had, as of Friday, a new rewrite that was submitted to us, which frankly turns everything back on its head. And by that, I mean it's a complete rewrite, and I have no idea what the particulars are going to end up looking like, or if the rewrite will convince 3 members of the committee to push it out. But I suspect right now we're still thinking 3-2 against. S30, the gun bill, is coming back to us. It had been vetoed by the governor and is now coming back to our committee for further discussion. I do not know at the end of the day where that will end up. Having finished my standing committees, I'm also on a couple of ad hoc committees. One is the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, which is currently discussing how cannabis retail establishments will be set up and delivering their product. The other committee that's a standing committee, an ad hoc committee that I am on is judicial retention. We're currently reviewing the retention of 6 different judges. Finally, the other committee that I'm on that's an ad hoc committee has to do with the State House and what to do with it. The building prior to COVID was absolutely jam-packed with people. There is a shortage of space all the way around. It has become much worse since the pandemic. We have radicalized many of the rooms in the building. If you go there right now, you are going to notice, if I use the example of the Senate chamber first, it looks like the flight deck of the Starship Enterprise with all of the electronics that are around the room. It is not a scene that I would prefer to have go on, but right now we're still in a hybrid mode between whether you can participate remotely or come back all together. We're hoping on March 8th to come back all together and join our compatriots in the House for some semblance of normalcy in that regard. But that too is an ongoing conversation. We're still out of space. There is conversation going on right now about trying to check out whether or not a proposal that had been done back in the 1980s when they built the cafeteria, that cafeteria was designed in such a way that another floor could be added on top of it. But that was back in the 1980s. So right now we're trying to get money available to have a plan to look into the architectural situation on whether it can still withstand another floor, and also whether it still would meet all the code requirements that were in place back in the 1980s. Those have obviously been updated since then. We don't know whether or not a floor on top of that cafeteria would meet code. I'll cut it off from there and say that both Jane and I have been asked to be at another meeting at 9 o'clock. So if I have to leave about 5 minutes beforehand to make that meeting, you'll know why I've disappeared. But thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start with Representative Terry Williams, and then Marsha Martel, you'll be after Terry.
Good morning, Representative Terry Williams. I represent Essex Caledonia. And since our last meeting, the Education Committee moved two bills to the floor for a vote. One bill being H483. Its purpose is to help find ways to improve the quality, duration, and access to career technical education in Vermont. There has been a stigma in Vermont and the country as a whole for way too long that technical schools are lower on the totem pole than colleges. Our aim is to change that mindset. The other bill is H456. This bill establishes goals and reporting requirements for the Vermont state colleges. The purpose is to ensure that students successfully achieve their academic goals in an environment that is affordable, accessible, equitable, and relevant to Vermont's needs. The state colleges have been lacking in documented reporting. This bill will keep the legislature in the loop so we can identify strengths and weaknesses. The state allocates a great deal of money to the state colleges. We have a vested interest in their results. I have also, on a district note, been working towards finding candidates for the position of probate judge for Essex County, as Judge Alan Hodgson has retired. I'm facilitating a meeting between the candidates and the community. That meeting will be held on Monday, March 7th at 6:30 at the town office in Lunenburg. I encourage all who can attend to come out and meet the candidates and help us give recommendations to the governor. As well, I have connected Kingdom East's new facilities manager with the state's coordinator of schools facilities improvements and hopes to help them procure grant monies to improve the district's facilities. The Education Committee also invited the principal of Linden Institute to testify on behalf of the technical program at the Institute so our committee can get a better understanding of the needs and concerns of their program and all tech ed programs across the state. I want to talk a little bit about the redistricting as well. And as mentioned before, there's nothing cemented in stone, but I'm pretty sure that in the end, it's going to kind of look like this. My district will consist of Granby, Victory, Lunenburg, Guildhall, Maidstone, and Brunswick. Plus, I will gain the towns of Burke, East Haven, Ferdinand, and Bloomfield. I will lose the towns of Kirby and Concord. So that's just a heads up on how it potentially will look like in the future. We have sent our budget requests to the appropriations. Some of our main focus are the Vermont State Colleges, UVM, hvac, the Governor's Institute, Adult Education and Literacy, and an Vermont Imagination Library. And hopefully when we get back from our break, we focus on S100, which is an act relating to universal breakfast and the creation of a task force for universal lunches. And that's about what I have today. Thank you.
Thank you. So Marcia Martell, followed by Marty Feltus, and then Scott Campbell.
Good morning. I'll just let you know my district didn't change at all, which doesn't surprise me. But we've been doing our markup on the capital bill, and it seems like everybody comes in wanting more money this year than ever. So I don't know if it's need, greed, or want, but it's just amazing how much more people come in and how much more they want than they've ever gotten before. And I agree with Joe that the only way to go on the capital is up, and we need to do some repairs. We need to do an addition, and I think going up is better than going out sideways on it. We getting 113 million of ARPA funds in the capital bill, and we're trying to distribute it amongst the branches so that no one branch gets all the money. But it seems even with that money that everybody's coming in and wanting it before we've even really decided how it's going to go. And I don't have a lot to say because there's not a lot to say until after we get things marked up and what's going to go where. And Scott's probably laughing and saying, you're right. But we do have a lot of people come in and testify about a lot of different things. And we've got quite a few that have got to come back and explain to us more in detail as to why they want the funds they want. But other than that, there isn't much else going on. So I'll send it off to you, Marty.
Thank you. I'm Marty Feltus. I currently represent what is Linden, Sutton, and Burke, and there are 2 representatives. It looks like the new district will be Linden, Sutton, Sheffield, Wheelock, and Newark. And that is yet to be determined, but that seems to be the way it's going, and it will have 2 representatives. At the start, I should tell you that Patrick Seymour, the other representative of the district, just recently resigned. His letter of resignation was read on the House floor on Friday. The Caledonia County Committee will be meeting to nominate some potential changes or potential replacements that will go to the governor. That's the process. And we hope that a replacement can be established very soon. Regarding the work I do, as Senator Kitchell referred, I work on the Appropriations Committee in the House. And so, yes, we are working on the budget for this coming year. Many of the same things that were discussed regarding the budget adjustment carry over to the current budget. We will be appropriating the remaining approximately $400 to $500 million of the ARPA funds. They will go into the same areas that both the legislature and the executive have indicated were priority areas, such as housing and broadband and mitigation to the climate changes, economic well-being, workforce development, and those areas. And we may use general funds for some of those purposes simply because it makes more sense in terms of their applicability. But nevertheless, there will be some significant investments in those areas as part of the budget. Another big thing that we will put into the budget this year is allocating an additional $50 million on top of the $150 million that we reserved last year to help resolve the pension issues. An agreement was made between a task force that worked last summer and fall and the executive branch and the labor unions to figure out how to resolve that pension issue going forward. And that will require this $200 million and some changes. But that has been agreed upon. And so that money will be part of the budget as well. Interestingly, fortunately, I should say, because we have a greater influx of general fund money and education fund money than we had expected. We're certainly using that money for many of the items that have been of great interest across the state, but we are also going to be able to dedicate 50 million of that as tax relief back to Vermonters. One proposal has certainly passed the House already, and that is a tax relief, that is a tax exemption to all children below 6 years of age. That takes up the 50 million. The governor had suggested a variety of tax relief efforts that would total 50 million. Whether the House proposal stays the same when it goes to the Senate or gets modified, I have no idea. But I know the intent, at least from the governor's perspective and the House's perspective, was to return at least 50 million to taxpayers in one form or another. So that's what the budget is doing. We will have to have that completed by March 18th, I believe, or perhaps it's March 25th. And then it will get sent to the Senate and they will do their magic on it. And we will end up with some kind of a compromise, I hope, about the middle of May. I believe really those are the main things that I expect to happen in the Appropriations Committee and in other areas that might be of interest. And so I'll pass it along to the next person. Thanks.
Thank you, Marty. So Representative Scott Campbell.
Thank you, Laurel. Good morning, everyone. Sorry I was late getting on. I couldn't find the right link, and I'm also here at Highland Lodge on vacation, theoretically, for my wife's birthday. So I've been having connection issues as well. Every once in a while, everybody freezes, and I don't know if it's me or if it's, I guess it's me. Interestingly, Marcia and I sit on the same committee, House Corrections and Institutions, which Joe chairs on the Senate side, and Marty and Jane are on Appropriations Committee. So we're all siblings here. So I'll just talk a little bit about what my notes are about the Capitol bill that I started last legislative breakfast. So just to remind everybody, it's a 2-year appropriation for bonded money, as opposed to the appropriations, which is 1 year using state revenues for ongoing programs. The amount that's bonded for every 2 years is set by a group called the Capital Debt Affordability Advisory Committee, CDAC. And this 2-year cycle, we have 123 million. Some of that could be offset by this large infusion of federal relief money, but there are tight restrictions. Our committee had targeted $15 million in last year in the FY22 and FY23 years. So even though it's a 2-year budget, we earmark money for each year. So we targeted $15 million, trying to in anticipation of those expenditures being eligible for ARPA offsets. The pandemic, American Relief and I forget what it stands for. American Relief and something Act. Anyway, the governor recommended not using all of that money, and instead recommended in the budget adjustment. So in the second year of the 2-year cycle with the capital bill, we do a budget adjustment, which is sort of a reallocation of some of the money. And the governor recommended using only $500,000 instead of $15 million as to shift to ARPA. He also recommended actually using creating something called a cash fund that would offset some of the expenditures in the capital bill with money from cash, which is a good idea. If we can spend money from cash rather than from bonded money, it of course reduces our future debt and interest payments. But of course that involves the Appropriations Committee, and so there's ongoing talks about whether we're going to sort of follow up with that cash fund proposal. Anyway, at the end, his proposed budget adjustment would wind up leaving a certain amount of bonded capacity. So I mentioned $123 million was our bonded capacity for the 2-year cycle. His recommendation would have left about $10 million of capacity unused. And as our chair, Representative Emmons, points out, if there's money on the table, somebody's going to come and fetch it. And Marcia was also commenting on that as well. People line up at the door, Alice Emmons says. So I mentioned some of the areas of investment that we are making last month. Others that we have looked at in more detail this month. Clean water. This is a huge requirement of the state from EPA, from the U.S. EPA, as well as local needs and issues regarding lead pipes and PFAS and everything else. So the clean water throughout the budget is the capital budget and other expenses is in excess of $100 million. That investment, it looks like, for the next year. Only about 10 million of that is from the capital bill, but a lot of it is from ARPA, federal money. Another area that we've been looking at is HVAC upgrades, heating, ventilation, air conditioning in various buildings, courthouses, correctional facilities, state house, community libraries. Another proposal for using some ARPA money in the capital bill. There's also a bill that passed out of Energy and Technology that our committee heard about on Friday that would aid towns with technology and resources to make energy efficiency upgrades and heating system replacements in municipal buildings, municipally owned buildings, statewide. So that could be up to, I think it was, $48 million or something like that. So the committee is going over this governor's recommendation with a fine tooth comb. That's, as Marcia said, that's this markup, as it's called, is what we're working on now. And when we get back, that will be our focus for the next couple of weeks. On corrections, I want to mention that we heard a really interesting presentation from this group called the Urban Institute that has an effort called the Prison Research and Innovation Network, PRIN, so-called PRIN, that is a research effort in cooperation with 5 states. Vermont is one of 5 states: Vermont, Delaware, Iowa, Missouri, and Colorado, to better understand prison environments and promote, as they call it, evidence-based improvements. So the first phase of this study was a survey during 2020 and 2021, a comprehensive survey done by of correctional staff and inmates, offenders at the Southern State Correctional Facility in Springfield. They had a really good response to this survey. Over 70% of both staff and offenders participated in the survey. The results were enlightening and disturbing, and point to priorities that we really need to focus on to improve conditions and make prisons more rehabilitative. So, and the reason is not only to help offenders get their lives together, but also to make them more likely to re-enter society successfully and not reoffend, most importantly, not get mixed up with the law again. So one point that affects all employers, but is especially acute with the corrections department is the staffing crisis. Correctional officers cannot function with a rehabilitative mindset when they're overworked and completely stressed, which they are. We hear continuously stories about that. And of course, corrections is one of those places where when the unemployment rate is so low, the corrections is one of the last places people apply for jobs. So they're in especially dire straits. I want to highlight one pair of survey results that really struck me. 78% of the staff said that they and their colleagues do not enforce rules consistently. And so just imagine if you're a parent and you're not enforcing your rules consistently on your children, what happens? They don't know what the boundaries are. So 78% of the staff had said that they and their colleagues do not enforce rules consistently, and 88% of the staff said that staff behavior influences the behavior of offenders. So they recognize what the problem is, that they're not reacting to issues consistently, and that is they're not setting boundaries, and the offenders are not behaving partly as a result. So we really have a broken system, one of many broken systems that has really been highlighted in stark relief by the pandemic. But recognizing the problem is the first step. So I'm hopeful that we at least recognize the problem, and we're going to take steps to fix it. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. So we do have a couple of questions in the chat. Before I go to that, does anyone have anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, Laura.
I do too.
ARPA, I'll just tell you, ARPA stands for the American Rescue Plan Act.
Thank you.
State fiscal relief is what we're talking about, financial relief. And then there's the local relief that went to the towns. But that's what ARPA stands for, American Rescue Plan Act.
Thank you, Jane. And Marcia?
Yeah, I just want to say we do have a new Department of Corrections, Nick Delm. I guess that's how you pronounce his last name. But Demo. Okay, and he's really young, but he picked up a lot of what Commissioner Baker started. He was really interested in what Commissioner Baker had put out to work with, and we got to meet him. Each committee member, there was three of us that met with him, so that he didn't have to meet with all of us at once. And we had a really good hour and a half talk with him, and got to get his ideas on things, and we were able to tell him about things that we thought. So it was a very good meeting with him, and I'm glad that we got to take it.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go to the first question, and this one is for you, Representative Williams. Will H 456 prevent a situation like what happened in the spring of 2020 when Jeb Spalding announced the possible closing of some of the Vermont State colleges, leaving many people surprised at his announcement, including legislators?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to answer that question. We cannot lose our state colleges. They are part of who Vermont is. With Vermont State Colleges, we have a tremendous opportunity to grow our own students and keep them in our state. It's going to bring in new population. So many kids come to the Vermont State Colleges to learn and fall in love, and they stay here. They financially support the communities all across the state. What happened with Jeb Spalding should not have been a surprise. In my freshman education committee opinion, my understanding is he came and he asked, and I don't think we heard quite loud enough the severity of his requests. Because of it, it was a wake-up call, and we need to do better. We need to hear better. We need to support the Vermont State Colleges for so many reasons, as I mentioned. The governor appropriated or requested a $30.5 million for the college. The colleges themselves asked for $48 million. So the Education Committee has sent that on to Appropriations in hopes that they will support that. And along with that $48 million, there is a $7 $1.4 million bridge fund that they need to bring them up to par. So that's a total of $55.4 million. Yes, that is a lot of money. And yes, this bill that we're trying to get through will help us all stay in communication with what the state colleges are doing. It'll help us understand. It'll help give support to their goals. I feel bad at what happened with Jeb Spalding because I blame us, the legislature, for not hearing him. This is the opportunity to reverse that and take better care of our state. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else have a comment on that question? No? Okay, so I have another question from Darcy, and it says to Jane, but to anyone, I guess. You had mentioned the 55 million going to housing. Is that the entire amount or additional monies being put aside for housing, considering the dire need for affordable housing? And if it is the 55 million alone, has there been any feedback on the fact that broadband would get 3 times the amount? So we'll start with Jane, and then if anyone else has a comment on that.
I want to be clear, the 55 million is in addition to what we budgeted last year. So we're approaching, I would think close to 200 million between everything in housing. So the 55 is in the Budget Adjustment Act, which is actually adding on to what was already there in the FY22 budget. So that is really putting all the housing entities under a great challenge. And you're seeing a lot of the projects currently underway. There is the old jail on Cherry Street. There is the apartment complex in Lindenville up across from the old Tap and Die. I mean, they're acquiring properties and rehabbing the other area that is still yet to be fleshed out. The request was made and it will be included in the FY23 budget. Is $5 million to start a new project called a homeowner pilot to address the high cost of housing, both in terms of construction as well as the inflated prices for what we would call, the ordinary Vermonters, those whose incomes are higher than what would qualify you for a subsidy, but certainly where housing is a real stress. There's also $20 million to in another bill that would go to help property owners rehab vacant apartments that are currently not being rented because they aren't up to code. So there's kind of a multi-strategy approach in terms of how housing is being addressed. There's also in Senate Economic Development looking at permits and ways in which housing can be costs can be addressed, as well as how the development of housing, infill development, can be supported. So there's really it's really multi pronged, so to speak, in terms of how and where building can occur, and also the financing. So it is on top of the ARPA money that we had and the general fund. And of course, there underneath it is the usual funding of VHCB that goes on as part of the budget every year. I didn't hear 3 times as much as what I'm sorry. I didn't hear the end of the question.
It was around, I think there's a perception that broadband is getting quite a bit more money.
I don't think that is the case. I'll have to look it up, but I don't think that was the case. Of course, broadband is one of the areas that is specifically identified in the Federal Infrastructure Act, as well as transportation and clean water initiatives. So there's a variety of funding. And then, of course, a lot of the infrastructure money, as I understand it, will be done in terms of grant applications, either by state agencies or local municipalities. So collectively, there's money coming down in so many different ways. It's really hard to keep it all together in terms of what does it look like cumulatively. But certainly broadband has been identified as really key to economic development, also for our kids to support their educational learning. So much work is done and research is done. So housing is certainly right at the top of the list, but broadband is there as well. Housing, I was talking to one of the people in Beta Technologies. They're actually developing electronic, not helicopters, but I guess airplane. I'm not really sure what you would call them. And they're recruiting and getting engineers from all over the country, and housing is their biggest challenge. So you're seeing a lot of what used to be vacant motels or underutilized motels being purchased. The one on the Barry Montpelier Road, for example, is in the process of being rehabbed. So I think our housing agencies have really have stepped up, and we're going to see a lot more housing develop. But it's not only the cost of the building, the renovations, it's the financing, and it's also ways in which to make the development more straightforward. And that gets into Act 250, which is always controversial.
Okay, so I have 3 questions from Dana Grady. Anyone else have a comment on the housing question? All right, so I'll start we'll do one at a time for Dana, and I'll start at the top. And this one goes to Marty Feltus regarding the $50 million tax relief you referenced. What different relief did Governor Scott propose, and what were the reasons the House chose to go in a different direction?
Yes, the governor proposed a package of tax relief proposals that would total the 50 million. And those were exempting military pension income from taxation, an earned income tax credit that is different than what we currently have, increased from what we currently have. It was also increasing the threshold of the Social Security income that would be taxed, so that would be reduced for individuals. There was an interest deduction for student loans, and there is a tax credit. There was a tax credit proposed for nursing income, hoping to encourage people go into nursing. There was a child care worker income tax credit and a manufactured housing replacement tax credit dealing with housing needs and climate needs, and downtown and village center tax credits. Those were a variety of things that totaled $50 million that the governor suggested in his budget. What the House did was to issue only one tax credit, and that is, I think the number is $1,200 per child under 6 years old, and that would equal $50 million. Frankly, the argument on the House floor was that very targeted tax relief was important for young families. It was important for their well-being. It was important for them to be able to work, to stay in the state. I will admit there was a lot of opposition to that on the House floor, feeling that the governor's package that was much broader and had a little bit for everybody was a better way to go. But that did not pass the House, and that bill is now in the Senate. So that was the governor's proposal, a much broader range of various credits as opposed to one single credit.
Okay, Dana's second question for both the Senate and House reapportionment. What are you hearing for a timeline to finalize those plans? Oh, and then Marcia, did you have a comment on what Marty said, or?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Marty, they were talking about putting some money into property tax relief. Is that anywhere in your committee, or is it even going to happen?
Are you perhaps referring to it may be a portion of the education budget in terms of, there's a surplus in the education fund and $90 million, and the governor had suggested that a portion of that should be plowed back into the fund in order to reduce property taxes.
Okay.
That has not been decided yet.
Okay, thank you.
No. Yeah, sure.
Does anybody know the
in terms of-
timeline on reapportionment?
I believe the timeline, at least for the House, it needs to be decided within a week or so after we return, certainly very soon, because I believe that the Secretary of State or government operations committees are going to say that any candidate who wants to file for next year is going to have to file by late April as opposed to late May, which was the rule before. So obviously people need to know what might be districts out there so they might know if they choose to run or not. So I'm thinking certainly by late March, it has to be decided. And I would guess a little bit earlier than that on the House side anyway.
Okay, another question from Dana. This goes out to Scott or Marcia. What is the current Newport courthouse plan regarding HVAC? And how is that discussion being impacted by the ongoing effort to locate land for a newly constructed courthouse?
I'll let Scott talk about the HVAC, but I will say with acquiring the land, we thought we had a done deal where that empty spot is, but that never happened. So we're back to step one of trying to find a piece of land. So it's not moving ahead like we planned because we're still looking for land.
Well, and my understanding is that the courthouse, well, both courthouses, both the county courthouse and the state are inadequate for the need. Everybody knows that, and there's an effort to build to find land and build a new courthouse. So my understanding is the HVAC is kind of on hold because of that. They may be doing some temporary fixes to try to reopen the courthouse for the time being, but they're not going to invest a lot of money in it right now. And I don't know, maybe Joe has some more information on it.
Just to add that I know that there is a series of negotiations going on right now for a plot of land for a new courthouse facility. And in the interim, the present courthouses are being reopened for judicial business.
Thank you. So I've got a question from Darcy, and this is something that's been on all of our minds for the past few days. This is about, have there been any discussions on how or if the situation in Ukraine affects Vermonters at all, whether that's, we're talking about a troop deployment or any other considerations? I'll open that up to anybody.
Well, one thought that I have about it is I think that, first of all, it's a very dangerous situation. It could easily spiral way out of control. And I think it's going to have an effect on inflation and on energy prices here, which unfortunately I think will lead people to sort of use that as a reason for not continuing to invest in renewable energy sources and transform or transition the economy away from reliance on fossil fuels. I noticed in the New York Times this morning a report about the new assessment from the International Panel on Climate Change that things are getting much worse, much faster than we thought, and we're in a serious bind here, and we're not really doing anything about it. We're not really changing our economy as quickly as we need to. So anyway, it's sort of a long-term impact, I guess, but that's my it may not be that longer term. That's
Laurel, Joe and I've got to leave Oh, I've got to leave. I think Joe said the same thing. So I just wanted to not be impolite, but I have to log on to another meeting.
Okay,
I
thank
just
you.
want to finish off that question, Laurel, and that is that there are no conversations going on right now that I'm aware of with Vermont's National Guard. And I know that this is a concern for everybody, but there are no formal conversations that we're aware of that would involve our National Guard being deployed anywhere else other than Washington, D.C. at the moment. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Joe. All right, thank you to everyone. I'm going to turn it over to Darcy. Do you want to close it out for us this morning?
Sure. I want to thank all of you. It was a short but intimate gathering here, but we got a lot addressed, and I thank you for all that you are doing over there and continue to do. We're going to try to, if we possibly can, with the COVID considerations in mind, look on March 28th to be at the St. J House, but we'll definitely keep you informed. We'll be sending you out notices and reminders. So look for those out there. I wanted to single out the Caledonian Record for their continuing coverage of these events. We really very much appreciate them, as well as Kingdom Access Television. Within about an hour and a half after we had the last legislative breakfast, Kingdom Access had already sent us the link and to put it on, so we can put it on our Facebook page. So a lot more people than came here this morning can see it, as well as on Kingdom Access Television. So thank you to everybody. Last but not least, we're also looking at perhaps having a speaker at either the March meeting or the April meeting. So we'll keep you all informed on if that's possible or who that might be, as well as the location. So thank you so very much. The next meeting is March 28th.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.